The most important memory of your life, the one you'd swear on, has already been rewritten. By you. Without your permission. Multiple times. Memory feels like a recording. A faithful, personal archive. Yours alone. You were there. You remember exactly how it felt. The light, the sound, the weight of that moment. That's why we trust memory above almost everything else. That's why courts of law were built around it. That's why when someone says, "I remember," we believe them. But here's the thing. No one tells you about your brain. It doesn't store memories like a hard drive. It doesn't preserve them like photographs behind glass. Every single time you remember something, every single time, your brain physically dismantles that memory at the molecular level, exposes it to everything you're currently feeling, everything you currently believe, and then rebuilds it. Then stores the new version. Not a copy, not a backup, the new version. You are not remembering the past, you are reconstructing it. And with every reconstruction, it drifts a little further from what actually happened. So ask yourself, that memory you'd bet your life on, how many times have you remembered it? Picture what memory looks like from the inside, not the content, the machinery. Hundreds of billions of neurons, each connected to thousands of others, firing in precisely synchronized patterns across the entire brain simultaneously. A memory isn't stored in one place. It's a constellation, a specific, fragile pattern of electrical activity spanning the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and beyond. When you remember something, you're not playing back a file. You're reigniting an entire galaxy of firing neurons, trying to recreate the exact same pattern that existed when the event occurred. If every neuron in your brain were a person, you'd have the population of Earth multiplied by 10,000, standing in perfect formation, passing signals at speeds exceeding 250 miles per hour, assembling something you call yesterday's lunch or your mother's voice. It is, by any measure, the most complex process happening in the known universe. It is extraordinarily beautiful. It is almost incomprehensibly elegant. And that elegance is exactly why it terrifies me. Because beautiful systems can be fooled, and this one is fooled every single time you use it. Right now, while you watch this, your brain is in the middle of a process called reconsolidation. Every memory, the moment it is retrieved, enters an unstable state. The proteins holding that neural pattern together literally dissolve. The memory becomes labile, plastic, editable, and then, over the next few hours, your brain reconstructs it and locks it back in place. This is not a flaw. This is how memory works. This is by design. But here's what that means in practice. Whatever you are feeling right now changes what you remember. Whatever you believe today subtly rewrites what you thought happened yesterday. If you remember your childhood through the lens of current grief, that memory becomes sadder than it was. If you revisit your biggest failure through the eyes of who you are now, the memory of your own intentions changes. The version of yourself you remember having been shifts. This happens with every recall, every time. The act of remembering is itself an act of rewriting. Researchers at New York University demonstrated this in 2000 when they identified the molecular mechanism behind reconsolidation in rats. And within a decade, the same process was confirmed in humans. The study published in Nature sent a quiet shock through the neuroscience community because it meant something enormous. There is no such thing as an untouched memory after the first retrieval. Every memory you access has already been modified by the act of accessing it. You have never remembered anything twice exactly the same way. But that's just the surface. What's underneath is worse. Here's what the justice system didn't know for most of the 20th century. Eyewitness testimony, the idea that a person who was present at an event can accurately describe what they saw, was considered the gold standard of evidence. Juries trusted it. Judges trusted it. Lawyers built entire careers on the power of a witness saying, "I was there." I saw this. I am certain. Elizabeth Loftus spent her career dismantling that certainty. In study after study beginning in the 1970s, Loftus demonstrated something that law enforcement did not want to hear. Memory is not only reconstructed, it is systematically contaminated by what happens after the event. She showed participants footage of a car accident and then asked a single question that changed everything. Some were asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? Others were asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? The word smashed produced higher speed estimates. It also made participants significantly more likely to later report seeing broken glass that was not in the footage. It never existed. Their brains inserted it. One loaded word, one leading question. And memory fabricated physical evidence that wasn't there. But Loftus went further. In what became her most disturbing line of research, she and her colleagues implanted entirely false memories into participants, memories of events that never happened. One study convinced adults that they had been lost in a shopping mall as children and rescued by a stranger. Another, and this is the one that matters, convinced people they had met Bugs Bunny at Disneyland. Shaken hands with him, felt his velvet ears. Bugs Bunny is a Warner Brothers character. He has never appeared at Disneyland. The encounter was physically impossible, and participants described it with vivid detail, genuine emotion, and complete confidence. Their brains did not flag the implanted memory as foreign. There was no alarm, no asterisk, no sensation that something was wrong. The false memory felt exactly like a real one, because to the brain, there is no difference. More than 375 people have been exonerated in the United States by the Innocence Project after serving years, sometimes decades, in prison. The single most common factor in their wrongful convictions: eyewitness testimony. Not malicious testimony, sincere testimony. People who genuinely remembered seeing something that did not happen. The system was betrayed by the witnesses' own brains. And those witnesses didn't know. They couldn't have known. Because memory doesn't come with a warning label that says this has been modified. Here's the question that researchers haven't fully answered. And it goes much deeper than wrongful convictions. If memory is reconstructed every time it is accessed, and if emotion at the moment of retrieval alters what is stored, then trauma therapy itself becomes a paradox. Neuroscientists at MIT and the Medical Research Council in Cambridge have been studying something called memory reconsolidation therapy. The idea that you can use the reconsolidation window, that moment when a memory becomes unstable, to deliberately rewrite traumatic memories with less emotional charge. Clinical trials are underway. Some results are promising. But here's the problem no one has solved. If you can use reconsolidation to heal a trauma, you can also use it to deepen one. Every time a trauma survivor is asked to recall their experience, in therapy, in court, in conversation, that memory is opened, potentially modified, and resealed. The emotional context of the room enters the memory. The therapist's response enters the memory. The question that was asked enters the memory. We do not yet know how much of what trauma survivors remember actually happened, and how much was shaped, frame by frame, by every subsequent retrieval. A study published in PNAS in 2014 found that emotional arousal at the time of remembering doesn't just color a memory. It can fundamentally alter the causal structure of events as a person recalls them. What feels threatening now becomes retrospectively more dangerous. What feels shameful now becomes retrospectively more humiliating. And if that's true, then every time you revisit your worst memories, you might be making them worse. Not by dwelling on them, simply by remembering. We still don't know where this ends. We still don't know if there is a version of your past that isn't contaminated by who you became after it. In 1953, A man known to science for decades as only HM, later revealed as Henry Molaison, had large portions of his hippocampus surgically removed in an attempt to control his severe epilepsy. The surgery worked, the seizures stopped, and Henry Molaison lost the ability to form new long-term memories entirely. He could remember his childhood. He could hold a conversation for a few minutes. But the moment attention shifted, the memory dissolved. Every morning, he woke up believing it was the early 1950s. Every day, he met his doctors for what felt to him like the first time. He lived in a permanent present, surrounded by a past that had frozen at the moment of surgery. He lived this way for 55 years. Researchers visited him thousands of times. He never remembered them. But something strange happened. He got better at tasks he was taught repeatedly, even though he had no memory of being taught them. His hands learned what his conscious mind could not retain. Henry Molaison was the most studied neuroscience subject in history. He never knew it. He never knew that his tragedy, his inability to hold on to memory, became the foundation of everything we understand about how memory forms, where it lives, and what it does to us. He died in 2008. Somewhere in his intact childhood memories, there was a boy who had no idea what he would one day teach the world. Because of him, we know the mechanism. Because of him, we know the hippocampus is not the vault, it's the constructor. And because of him, we know that who you are and what you remember are far more fragile and far less fixed than you have ever been told. You are the sum of your memories. Your personality was shaped by moments you remember. Your fears were built by experiences you carry. Your values, your identity, your sense of who you have been, and therefore who you are. All of it assembled from memory. But every single memory in that archive has been reconstructed. Some have been reconstructed dozens of times. Each reconstruction passed through a different version of you, a younger you, an angrier you, a grieving you, a version of you who had already learned something that changed how the past looked in retrospect. The autobiography you live inside was never transcribed. It was written and rewritten and rewritten again. You are not the person who had those experiences. You are the person who remembers having had them, and those are not the same person. Somewhere in your brain, right now, a constellation of neurons is holding a version of your life that belongs entirely to you, and is, in some precise and measurable way, not completely true. Not because you lied, not because you forgot, but because the act of being alive, of feeling and changing and growing, means that every time you look back, you are looking back through different eyes. You have never had access to your actual past, only to your current interpretation of it. And that interpretation, shifting, emotional, endlessly reconstructed, is what you call yourself. Your memory builds who you are from fiction. But there is something else that builds who you are, from chemistry. Something that decides your mood, your anxiety, and your sense of self before your brain even finishes waking up. Something that's been called your second brain. Not because it thinks, but because it controls more of your emotional life than the brain in your skull does. That's the next video. If you made it this far, you already know what dark anatomy does. It doesn't let you leave with the same certainty you had when you arrived. Subscribe. Because what comes next lives inside your gut, and it's been making decisions you thought were yours. Keep looking inward.